What's going on, everyone? My name's Westie from the Blockworks research data team. And by the end of this talk, I hope to have convinced you that active addresses are the most overhyped and misused metric within this entire industry. And so as we begin, we'll start with a refresher on what active addresses are. They can be defined as distinct blockchain addresses that have taken some on-chain action within some defined time period. Think daily active address, monthly active address, etc. Active addresses are the most widely used metric within the industry that isn't some cash flow metric like revenue, fees, or REV. And as someone who understands the flaws, I was trying to figure out, what makes this metric so alluring despite it not being a very good metric. And I'm going to go one by one across a ton of examples here, and I think it immediately hits you what the answer is. And you get bonus points if you call them users and not addresses, and you get extra bonus points if you use a cumulative chart. But the thing that hits you, I think, is basically a twofold answer, which first is that the metric is super easy to understand. You feel like you immediately see this and you know, oh, this is the number of people using the blockchain. And the most important piece, the charts are up and to the right. And who in crypto doesn't love a chart that's up and to the right? So what you feel when you look at the chart, you immediately think what it's telling you is that the number of people using this protocol is growing over time. But this intuition, as we'll get to, actively leads you to the wrong conclusions. Okay, so what's wrong with active addresses? The first and most important piece is this false equivalence. Addresses are not users. And I could go on and on about user behavior being very different in Web 3 than Web 2. I know I have 10 different addresses on Solana that would be considered active in the past month, and I'm sure many people in this audience who are on-chain would agree. User behavior is different, but the real key piece are these bots. It is super cheap and easy to spin up a bot, and it's super easy to make it look active as well, which brings us to our second point. The metric is very easily gamed and manipulated. This slide right here fits this line of JavaScript code, and this alone can spin up infinitely many addresses, as much as you'd like. You're only limited by the amount of gas fees on the chain. And so this example, you can get 100,000 active users for only $85 in gas fees on Base. It's extremely cheap to spin up bots that look active. And so as a result, there's not a lot of signal in the data. And this brings me to what I call Westie's law. If a metric is cheap and easy to game, and there's any incentive to game it, it will be gamed. And in crypto, there's plenty of incentive to game this metric. There's an airdrop happening somewhere on some chain all the time. There's incentive programs every day. And so maybe at the chain level, if there's an airdrop happening, you can maybe get some signal, but there's airdrops happening in different apps in the same ecosystem. And so as a result, the entire metric of active addresses has no signal. And it's not just a problem in Web 3. In Web 2, companies lie all the time about their metrics. Whether it's a big tech company lying about their ad reach, or it's a new startup trying to raise more money from venture capital. If the metric can be gamed, and there's an incentive to game it, it will be gamed regardless of whether it's on blockchains or in Web 2. Which brings us to our final point. Because of all this, because of the bots, there's no predictive signal. The metric doesn't actually tell you anything. And one way to showcase this, and I'm using our new dashboard builder at Blockworks Research for this, but basically, you would think if active addresses are telling you, like there's some signal in that metric, that there would be a pretty strong correlation with REV, or the amount of fees and tips that are being paid on the chain. More users, more fees, right? But with Ethereum and Avalanche as the examples I was using, the correlations are medium at best, if not extremely weak. And so if this relationship is weak, you really can't tell anything about active addresses. And so when you see a chart like this, where active wallets or active addresses fall off a cliff, your reaction should not be, oh, they just lost a bunch of users immediately. No, the obvious reaction is that a bot farm had to shut down for some reason. And so the metric was wrong to begin with. And so we're looking at these charts that are up and to the right. You can't actually say they're telling you anything. This obviously begs the question, okay, genius, if it's such a problem, why haven't we fixed this yet? And the answer is It's an extremely hard problem to solve because you need many different pieces to be in place. So for instance, there's no easy way to directly link users to wallets. It'd be great from the data side of things if KYC chains or KYC in general took off, because then we could link users to addresses. But because of the ethos of crypto that we all love, that just isn't the case and will not be the case. And so as a result, you need actual statistical modeling to figure out where the signal actually is. But the issue with that is that the data sets are ginormous, they're huge. And so your random team is not going to find signal in this metric. You need dedicated data infrastructure and the right incentives in place for teams to figure out that signal. And the final piece is that every protocol has different needs. Protocols are optimizing for different things. And so as a result, it's hard to have one solution that fits all. You need multiple approaches that you're taking that are tailored to each individual protocol, what they're optimizing for and what they're looking for. And this is where Blockworks research comes in. We have the right data infrastructure, the right incentives for our data team to actually find signal in granular address data and get rid of active addresses altogether. And so I'm going to go through a couple different approaches that we are taking in order to find signal in this metric. The first is what we're calling quality active addresses. This is basically a multivariate model, so it ingests a bunch of key features about a wallet, like longevity, frequency, TVL, et cetera, and takes all of that and outputs a quality score. And this can be a binary or it can be some sort of distribution. But the pros of this, you've just taken this active address metric that has no signal and you've given it signal. And now you can actually see real trends over time, as opposed to a metric that tells you nothing. The cons to this approach is you need to actually define what quality is. We are approaching this as quality means at the chain level, you're trying to predict future REV that this address is going to pay, and at the app level, you're trying to predict future fees. But quality can change depending on what protocols are looking for, and so you're kind of forcing standardization potentially. So as a result, we're taking a different approach, which is more targeted, and this is wallet personas. So we want to cluster addresses by on-chain behavior in order to surface user archetypes. Because again, every app is different. So if you're an LST protocol, you're probably optimizing for TVL and for longevity, versus a meme coin launchpad is optimizing for fees. It doesn't matter if there's retention of any single address. And so when you start to see addresses, what they're like, their persona, you start to get really granular with who is using your application, and you can make targeted approaches in your growth. And so you get insights tailored for a specific protocol. However, unlike QAAs, it's hard to generalize, requires heavy feature engineering. So you constantly need to be making sure you're changing your weights based on how user behavior changes over time. Some other methods we're also taking, so human versus bot bifurcation. So can we find different methods or ways to actually separate what is a human or what is likely a human and what is likely a bot? And there's a lot of good insights you can glean from this. Geographic distribution, can we start to see where addresses are actually using different applications or protocols? Tracking cross-chain flow of funds, so not only tracking what the same EVM address is doing across EVM chains, but can we link chains on Solana with Ethereum rollups, with Cosmos chains? Can we track clusters across different chains? And then some other approaches such as address profitability on different chains. What's the diversity score? Are users using different applications on these chains? And we might dabble in on-chain credit scores and on-chain leaderboards. Who are the biggest users on this chain, and what are they doing? And so yeah, that's our talk. If you're a protocol and you want to know more about your users and target specific growth, absolutely reach out as we build this. You can reach me at Westie at blockworks.co, or you can email our research at blockworks.co. Thank you guys, and enjoy some lunch.